Hello and welcome to the stream. My name is Matt from the Arbitrum Foundation, and this is yet another one of our Stylus Showcase series. So today we're going to be talking to some people from Fairblock. We've got Payman, Bowen, and Satara to talk about Fairblock and their use of Stylus Pro. But first of all, let me just give you a quick little recap about this series. This is a series that we're running at the moment aimed at developers and learning about the developer experience and real-world developers' experience of using Stylus and developing smart contracts on top of Arbitrum using Rust, with real projects that are actually doing this at the moment. So we've had a few previous ones. Feel free to look up on YouTube. We're going live. We're on YouTube, Sanko, and X. So wherever you prefer to go and have a look. We've got the previous episodes that we've done as well. We've also just recently started a Stylus Pro series in which there were some great, there's 3 great episodes of that, going a bit deeper into kind of more of a hands-on workshop. And just this week, my colleague Crisco from Off-Chain Labs was doing a talk about how to implement a particular financial pricing protocol on Stylus using Rust, which was great as well. And that Pro series, so next week we have Lit Protocol coming on here, and we also have that Pro series again running the week after, the 22nd to 24th. So if you want to get really deep down into it and hands-on, there's that as well. And also just to mention the Stylus NFT, we had the Stylus launch NFT, that's at mintstylus.xyz. And if you actually minted that during the first few weeks, then you actually have a chance to claim some physical merch, Stylus merch. You can burn your NFT in exchange for a Stylus cap and plushie. So that's great. So with that all said, like I said, we have Payman, Bowen, and Satara here. So thanks, folks, and welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot for inviting us. Super happy to be here and proud to be one of the real projects to work to build with Stylus.
Exactly, that's great. I mean, it's all great, you know, sort of me standing up a DevRel person and say, hey, look, you can do this or you can do that. But you know, it's even better when we get like people that are actually building stuff on. And what's great is Stylus has not actually been live that long now, and you know, we've already got so many projects that are actually building, you know, real world stuff on it. So, I guess to start with. Do you want to give like a quick overview of Fairblock, a bit about the protocol, a bit about MPC, multi-party compute, that people might not be, you know, necessarily familiar with, and you know what it is that you're trying to solve, and how you're leveraging Stylus?
For sure. So in general, we call Fairblock a dynamic confidentiality network, and in that confidentiality network, we have like MPC encryption. And what MPC means in general, in crypto, most people are familiar with like threshold signatures and wallets, but what we really mean is like NPC, when there is a lot of validators that they can compute over encrypted data, or they can decrypt some like encrypted state, and they can have like computational like confidentiality. So that's what we really mean. And the value of that, it can be like pretty big. So for example, for like DeFi, gaming, AI, so like any kind of real application that we want to have on chain, in like most cases, there's some element of confidentiality, some kind of like encrypted mempool that we like often realize that is like very fundamental to the logic of that application. And our mission here in Fairblock is bringing as a specialized network that facilitates this kind of like computations, cryptographic computations, to bring it to like major blockchains like Arbitrum, major ecosystems like Arbitrum, like OPS Stack, like all of the EVM, and even like Cosmos chains, and in future Ethereum. So applications and like chains can easily plug it in to their logic, and then they can build like new applications that were not even possible before.
Okay, cool. That sounds cool. So just for people not so familiar with multi-party compute, so the point with multi-party compute, let me just see if I get this right, and you can tell me where I got it wrong. On a simple case, it allows 2 people to effectively transact, but the computation happens by a multiple series of parties. That's a multi-part bit, but no one party has like the full information. right? Is that a
you did a better job than me. So in general, like in most cases of like MPC algorithms, you have like some kind of secret sharing. And
right?
when you run the secret sharing, there is like parts of the secret in that like committee or like multiple parties in the system, and nobody has access to the actual secret. And using that secret, they can compute over encrypted data. They can decrypt something in a way that nobody has like this, like there is no centralized party here. So I think you can think of it as the actual value of blockchains with decentralization, but like we can glorify that in the sense that with blockchains we have like everything it's centralized. Here we can have like confidential compute, even like the nodes, they don't know what they are doing unless it's necessary to decrypt.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's cool then. So talking about sort of Stylus and why Stylus, how did you think about like what chain to build on? I mean, from what you've said so far, you're building on a number of different blockchains. Currently, what brought you to Stylus? What was the the thinking behind using Stylus and
Yeah,
Arbitrum?
yeah, maybe Bon, we can take it.
Yeah, so our thought process behind choosing Stylus was pretty straightforward. So we first looked at like where majority of users and developers are, and that's like EVM-based ecosystems. We wanted to bring like cryptography primitives over to the EVM ecosystems, but doing it in like just pure EVM opcodes is pretty infeasible at the moment. I think everyone can agree that it's highly expensive gas-wise to do so. And then Stylus has this really custom execution environment where everything gets executed, compiled down to WASM. So you can take advantage of like Rust crates to do the job for you. And that makes it a lot more feasible to do. So it was like a no-brainer behind choosing Stylus to build these primitives on. Yeah.
Cool. So the performance side of it and the fact that what you were trying to do, I guess just within Solidity would just be infeasible in terms of the actual gas costs, the performance to do it. But also there, you mentioned about the Rust crates and the Rust ecosystem. That's something we've heard a lot from people on here is about how they're able to utilize existing libraries within the Rust ecosystem as part of this, and that seems to be like a very powerful thing. And I imagine for things like compute. Regarding like things like encryption and that sort of thing, you want to use libraries that have been battle tested, and you probably save a lot of time within your project by if that thing already exists, right, to be able to utilize that. So that's cool. Did you consider any others? I mean, how's this compared to what you're doing with other chains? Are you doing what you're doing on Stylus on other chains, or is it doing something completely different now because of the facilities you have with Stylus?
I would say the main differentiation point between choosing Stylus over other sort of solutions is that with Stylus, we can make it like purely permissionless deployments, whereas to make it feasible for other chains, we either have to create custom modules or like precompiles, in which case like the chain needs to upgrade and it needs to get approval by like the community that way. However, if Stylus is available to us, we don't really need to go through any of that. We can just deploy it ourselves permissionlessly, and if it's useful, people will end up using it.
Okay, cool. That's really interesting. Yeah, I've not really thought about that. So yeah, so other chains might have some of this functionality, but like you said, you've got to deploy a custom module, which means you really need your own chain to do this. Whereas with this, you could choose. You could do your own chain through something like Orbit, Arbitrum Orbit, or you could do it on a public chain like Arbitrum One using Stylus. So you kind of get the flexibility, but like you said, it's permissionless because you don't need to actually deploy a precompile or a core module. So you don't have to get all of the nodes to upgrade at a particular time or whatever it is that you have to do with maybe other chains to get that level of functionality. You can do that at the smart contract level, have that power, but at a much higher level. So
I think in general, there are like three paths that we've seen do this, especially the confidentiality category. A lot of people call them co-processors, or like they call them like cryptographic computers or encryption computers. So there are different names, but The first category is doing everything, basically, to put it in simple terms, doing everything in your confidentiality network. So in terms of receiving inputs, inputs can be received on other chains too, but like they should be like somehow transferred to the network. Then you can encrypt them, compute over them, and then the results can be posted back, only the outputs to the like other chains like Ethereum or like Arbitrum, right? So this way it's also permissionless, but everything is inside the chain. So we can also offer that, and it's like the good thing about that is um, like pre-requirement from the other chains. Like we can do everything permissionlessly. We've done the same. We have the integration with CloudSwap in this path. The other path is the module path. The good thing about that is that if we have that, basically anything on top of that chain have access to our encryption flexibilities and functionalities. The challenge with that is that we should install the modules in the first place. So on the Cosmos side, we have Cosmos modules. It's pretty easy. It's just like 10 lines. It's just on the EVM side for OpenStack, we have like a pre-compile that they can install. But even though it's like easy, it still needs like the initiative from the teams, from the protocols to actually install that, right? With the Stylus, it's the very interesting third category that we can have somehow the best of the both worlds. It's like permissionless, but also it doesn't need the it doesn't have the other challenges that we see.
Okay, cool. That's that's really interesting. So, in terms of actually working with Stylus, so maybe Cetera, maybe you can say, so you've been working with like Stylus directly with this. You're one of the engineers that's been. Sorry, I realized I forgot to ask you all to introduce yourself at the start. So sorry about that. But Cetera, you're one of the engineers that's been working on Stylus, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, how's the developer experience been with Stylus so far?
So actually I had a very positive experience with the Stylus. Like as someone who has experience with both Rust and Solidity, it was very easy for me to get started with the Stylus. It was like it's for most of the parts like just writing your normal functions and like functionality in Rust. So you don't need to like do any extra steps or learn anything very new. So yeah, and also like the documentation for Stylus has been very comprehensive. Like I just used the official documentations and I was able to get started like using the provided examples. Yeah, so overall, yeah, it was a very straightforward process to work with this one.
Cool. Well, that's always good to hear from our point of view. They go well. So you had Rust experience before, and this is like one of the things that's interesting with Stylus is, that I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like 30,000 Solidity developers out there, 3 million Rust developers out there. I think there's 15 million developers if you look at Rust, C++, and C all added together, all of which could compile down to WASM and deploy to Stylus. Rust is the main SDK that we've been working on at the moment, but anything that compiles down to WASM is viable there. So you came with Rust experience. Is that something that you've been using with other sort of blockchains, or was this from previous like non-blockchain world?
So yes, it was like not other blockchains, but we have been implementing like our protocols and like the also like our encryption and decryption mechanism off chain with Rust. So we were just able to like bring that on chain with Solidity. Yeah.
That's cool, and that's what I think a few people have kind of said this. The nice thing with Rust and Stylus is that you can use it both on chain and off chain, right, as well. Whereas Solidity, you use it on chain. It's an on chain language, but people don't write backend stuff in Solidity. I've kind of said a few times on these talks, it reminds me a little bit about JavaScript and Node.js. Was JavaScript was originally a browser language just used within the browser, and then Node.js came along and people were able to use it on the back end, and suddenly you had people that were able to transfer their language skills and knowledge and libraries, and existing code bases between the sort of the front end and the back end. And we're kind of saying the same thing, I think, with Rust, and now that Stylus enables is you can kind of combine off-chain and on-chain in a similar sort of architecture, right? You can work on something off-chain, bring it on-chain as need be, or take it off-chain, and you're using the same code base. So with something, something like encryption, one of the big problems is you have an encryption library, you encrypt it, and then you decrypt, and then suddenly it doesn't work. And you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. Is the fault with my encryption or my decryption? Because the bit in the middle is opaque, right? And if you've written one in one language and one in another language, and you've hit some random edge case or some minor bug to do with rounding or alignment or something like that, right? It's for cryptographic stuff, I think having in the same language is a really like powerful value proposition for developers. So
yeah, that's actually what got me in the first place. Like, I know like Stylus is pretty new, but just like an interesting story here is that exactly 2 years ago in like East Toronto, I met one of my friends in Arbitrum Foundation, and he was actually like we were talking about like how boring crypto is getting. There's no new like cryptography, there's no new applications, and he just dropped the name. We are building Stylus, and then I searched it like that night, and like he shared like some like insight with me, and then I read that, oh wait, like they are talking about cryptography libraries here, and it got me really excited. And this was the original story. And I think like, as you know, like blockchains are based on many innovations from like cryptography side, and it's very exciting to like have like Rust libraries, which is like most of the serious libraries, cryptographic libraries are in Rust, right? Because of the performance or the security. And having this kind of fragmented things on like one side is a Go client, the other side is like Solidity, the other side is Rust, is pretty annoying, and in many cases like just like blocks the development, or it's not secure, right? So Stylus is a very great way to have like cryptographic libraries on chain, and I'm sure that this is like the beginning of many innovations.
Yeah, and we've heard as well things like testing then become a lot easier in unit testing, right? You could write a library or a function that you run completely off chain and are able to test it, and especially unit test it, and then bring it on chain. You're not really able to do kind of like off chain unit testing of Solidity code, right? Too easily or not naturally. Whereas with Rust, that makes that a lot easier. So
yeah, okay. Even if we can do like it's like one part is the easier path. The other thing about it is the security and like how standard it is, right? So it's like always better to use like standard cryptographic libraries than reinventing it and like potentially have bugs.
And that code only needs to be audited once, right? As well,
yeah.
Right? Not having to audit both a Stylus version, a Rust version, and a Solidity version of the same library, right? You can just audit one of them, and then you can use that in both locations. So that saves a lot of time. I think that probably saves a lot of expense in terms of things like auditing. And I imagine it probably gives you a wider field within, if you're looking at things like auditors, security testing, all of that stuff, there's going to be a lot out there for Rust. Again, it's a much bigger marketplace than just Solidity. So there's probably just the economies of scale there in terms of who you can turn to audit code or test code or performance optimized code or whatever it might be that you need. Cool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Financially, it's also more efficient.
Yeah. So what does your development workflow look like with Stylus then? In terms of a day-to-day, in terms of developing your code, what does that look like? The particular tools, IDs, what is it you use to develop your code?
Okay.
Yes, so what we have is that like we are using the Stylus in Rust and like the tools that like Cargo Stylus that are just for building the contracts on chain. And yes, so we have like several contracts for the whole process, and the whole process is just to deploy the contracts, and then we have some examples to how to use them. And for this, we have been using like there are so many, like that's a good point about the Stylus, is that there are so many examples that we can use. Like there are so many repositories that we were using, like just to get an idea of how to like go with the process and deploy the contracts and how to resolve the problems that we have. But yeah, so that's the main use that we have with the Stylus. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And in terms of your actual sort of protocol and what you're building using Stylus and Rust, what specific parts of it like benefit from Stylus? Are you kind of using a blended approach of using some Stylus stuff and traditional Solidity, or is it all going into Stylus? Is there a particular area where you see Stylus like benefiting the most?
So we are performing the whole decryption on chain using a stylus, and all of this is written in Rust. Like it's compatible. Like the good point about a stylus is that it can't be used. It can be used from the Solidity contracts as well. So there's no extra steps for that. So any application can use like our decryption contracts, which are written in Rust, to perform the decryption. And I think like for most parts, like all of these, like we are using the packages in Rust that I don't think are feasible to be used on Solidity. So for implementing the whole like decryption process, like we are really using the stylus features and Rust features. So yeah, that's what's useful for us.
Cool. Yeah, so yeah, encryption again. I think a lot of this comes back to encryption. Anybody that's doing anything to do with encryption, privacy, MPC, zero knowledge, whatever, then that's a great thing. I remember speaking to another protocol who are building, an MPC thing, and they're having to create their own network just to run their MPC stuff for exactly the same reason, Payman, you were talking about, that they need that flexibility, so they've got to basically build their own network to do that. Whereas, I'm trying to convince them to come over to Stylus as well. But I think they could port over a lot of their stuff. I think they're writing in Rust as well, so that'd be that would be great to do that for them too.
I think in general, one of the challenges that we've seen over and over with like privacy or encryption space, even outside Web3, is the fragmentation, is the inaccessibility of these kind of amazing technical tools. But when it comes to product market fit and users, the challenge is that we have something like Tor, which is great, but most people, even in the countries that they really, really need something like Tor, it's very hard for users to take the migration path from the the actual internet from their browsers and to something like Tor, right? The reasons are technical, there is psychological reasons, and all of that, right? Everybody loves privacy, but not as much as giving up watching cat videos on Facebook, right? So I think it should be accessible. It should be there's a reason that 95% of the internet is encrypted today. All of our some of our messages are actually encrypted, our emails are encrypted, but nobody actually knows that. The reason that my grandmother is encrypting her information on internet, it's the accessibility and how seamless it is, right? So that's kind of our vision in Web3. We don't need to do everything in a separate network just for having privacy. We still need networks like blockchains or all kind of networks to have this kind of specialized computation, or sometimes we even have the application on that network. But I think the more connected we are in this kind of architectures with other ecosystems, the more users we can have, the more seamless we can offer these services to the users. We can actually see some of our demos that it's pretty seamless on the user side. It doesn't take minutes or even 20 seconds to encrypt your transaction. It's seamless, just like internet, how you're sending your messages and it's encrypted through HTTPS and you don't even notice that, right? So we are doing the same in Web3, right? On the backend side, I think it's important to be very flexible. So there's a lot of trade-offs when it comes to decentralized networks, and the flexibility and being able to sometimes be more decentralized, sometimes make it less frictionless. I think that's where we are playing with.
Yeah, I think that's right. And with the Arbitrum ecosystem, with networks like Arbitrum One, you have a huge existing community there, both in terms of users, in terms of developers, but also things like liquidity and protocols that are on there, right? We've seen other projects that have come about and said, hey, look, we're going to build a whole new network that is privacy by default or whatever. And that's I totally agree. That's a great approach in terms of making privacy default, but it's very difficult to bootstrap a community. That's the harder bit, right? To build that, you can put the protocols in place, but to actually get the liquidity, to get the community, to get the users on there, to get the other protocols on there. And I think that's one of the great things here with Stylus is that, if you want to use, so, we're talking to, I've just been looking at doing some work with the Uniswap hooks, Uniswap v4 hooks, and doing something like them, that within Rust, right? So you could write a Rust hook for Uniswap just the same way that you could do with Solidity, right? or if you need to access a Chainlink, a VRF or something like that, right, from within your Stylus contract, you can do, regardless of whether that's in Stylus or whether that's in Solidity or whatever. So you've got that nice bridge between the two that's completely seamless. So you don't have to like bootstrap an entire ecosystem from the ground up, right? And that I think is really cool. And so I think projects building upon Stylus can like leverage all of that's there. Because I think that's probably the harder bit. Harder than
composability for the developers. I think it's important to have like composability to be able to use like different tools like easily, like a puzzle, how it can come together and be like something interesting. And the whole picture, you can see the whole picture once the puzzle is. I think like this kind of like fragmentation of technologies is probably one of the challenges that we still don't see like very interesting applications yet. I think we are still building some kind of fragmented technologies, and the whole picture is when we can actually like compose them in an interesting way. And on the other side, the whole picture, we can finally see that when there is like good UX, it's not like fragmented, and there's like interoperability like everywhere, right? So I think there's a lot of noise in the crypto ecosystem, but I think good projects are all somehow in the same category. They're either working on the composability and like different networks that can make like something that is really bad today, or like something that is not possible on the network side and the infra side, or on the user side, how they're connecting all users together and the communities.
Yeah. I was about to ask. I mean, one of the questions I've got is about how do you see Stylus impacting the broader Web3 ecosystem? But I think you've pretty much just answered that there in terms of the composability. I think that really is key. Composability and interoperability, as you described that there, I think is a key function. And the fact that Stylus lets you build those more powerful apps, but still have composability with the existing ecosystem.
It's also interesting you mentioned like Uniswap, right? So like there's like Uniswap on Arbitrum, like Orbit. We have a like a really nice demo here that we've brought our cryptography network, our own like expertise in a sense. There's like Uniswap, their expertise on DeFi and DEX, and there's like you guys and Stylus, right? So it's interesting that we've combined all of that, and we now have like the front running protected or like encrypted limit order service that is not fragmented. So like the technology and the user base and everything is somehow like frictionless in a sense. So that's a like good example. And we are by just building in the Arbitrum ecosystem, we are exposed to many like new kind of creativity. We are working with teams like Zai on the gaming part. When people talk about encryption, they tend to think about very black and white kind of movies, like scary kind of situations, like mostly finance. But the reality is that like today's internet, everything is encrypted. Even a game is encrypted. Even like your messages are encrypted. And most of the applications that we have today, it's either like very limited, or it's like people are not very happy about building all of these infras just for token farming and meme coins, right? So like even voting on chain, it's kind of limited because you can see like other people can see your vote, right? Many auctions, it needs like the bids to be encrypted, right? So that's the way that we are bringing this kind of technology, our own applications, and like we are basically by technologies like Stylus and this kind of modular technologies, composable technologies, we are exposed to more and more opportunities.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways, we almost went backwards in Web3, right, in terms of privacy, because the whole point about a public decentralized blockchain is everybody can see the transactions, everybody can verify the transactions, right? So without including something like, MPC or, fully homomorphic encryption or zero knowledge proofs or that kind of, without using some of these technologies, we almost went slightly backwards, right? And that suddenly everybody can see everything, and that's probably one of the holdups. And so, yeah, hopefully like projects like yourself.
That's also one of the confusions here. Like, I don't see like transparency to be like on the other side of privacy, right? I think we can still have transparency and have privacy in the same time too, right? And if you think about it, we have better transparency and better like privacy in like, unfortunately, in like Web 2 or like on a real life, when we go to banks, we are not hiding our identities. We are not necessarily showing everything that we are doing with our accounts. So in rare cases, we are like, I don't know, like authorities or like some people, they can send a request and they can share some kind of metadata about our accounts. So we don't even have that kind of privacy and like transparency in Web3, right? This is the reason that people are not using, even like people in crypto, many of the businesses are not using crypto for payroll because you can just see like how many transactions. Like that's like a very, the most obvious basic application in crypto is broken. And if you want to solve it, you should go back to the previous like solutions like KYC. So I think there is like middle grounds, and the first step here is that take a step back and take the control of all of the information. And the answer is selective disclosure, right? So I don't think like extremist people are going anywhere. Like you shouldn't go like all like not sharing anything or like not like sharing everything, right? Because with sharing everything, the application doesn't work. With not sharing everything, like you cannot work, right?
Right. But I mean, and this is the beauty with things like zero knowledge and MPC and things like that, is that you allow that selective like verifiability without necessarily
Exactly.
compromising the privacy. We can still have privacy, yet we can still verify that I've still paid you, but that's not public apart from who we decide it to be
Exactly.
verifiable to, for example. So
and
that's great.
If we talk about blockchains in the general sense as the new internet, where we have like all kind of applications, it's not necessarily just transfers. So in that world, like many applications doesn't have any challenges with like compliance, because if you are using it for voting, confidential AI, or even games, they don't really have any challenges in their confidentiality or like privacy related like regulatory challenges, right? Even in DeFi world, when we have like most of the applications just need some kind of ephemeral privacy. So like, for example, what we have with IB for front-running protection, for like sealed bid auctions, you don't need to like keep everything like hidden forever. It's like mostly some kind of protection in the meantime, so other bots and other competitors cannot exploit that. So like my point here is that maybe in like 95% of scenarios, you don't really have any challenges, like none. In that 5% of scenarios, which is basically just transfers, there is a lot of good solutions. Like there is like privacy tools like ZK, and like can have like proof that the funds are not coming from like sanctioned addresses. You can also combine it with other solutions like decentralized identifiers. And ironically, you can use encryption and threshold decryption projects like Fairblock for compliance, because you can encrypt it, and then like the authorities can request for decryption, right? So there is like a lot going on even just for that 5%. It's not the case that like we are blocked. I think people got a little bit too afraid of talking about privacy in crypto, like a little bit prematurely.
Yeah, I think I saw on your site one of the applications you mentioned on there is a privacy enabled like Uniswap style DEX, and like you said, you don't necessarily need privacy forever, but being able to protect the privacy during a window of transactions certainly has a benefit that enables that prevents manipulation of a market, for example, or seeing competitive information during an actual swap or match process. Or you could imagine, like you said, voting, right? Yeah. We want to be able to have some voting. We want to be able to vote on something. Maybe we want to keep that voting information secret during the vote, so that I don't see, okay, well, Satera voted this, Bowen voted this, I'm going to vote this as a result, right? We can't necessarily see what each other's voted. We can vote, and then after a certain period of time, then it can be revealed and verified, okay, this is who voted for this person or this project or outcome or whatever it might be. So that's really cool. Yeah, just to come back a little bit in terms of kind of support and advice. Maybe Satera, do you have any kind of like advice to anybody kind of starting with Stylus in terms of anything you found useful, community help? You mentioned the documentation already being very good, which is great. Anything else you want to add?
Sure. So aside from the documentation and like the examples, for me, the Discord discussions were very helpful. Like for some of my issues that I had, just like simple issues, I was able to just by searching, even I didn't have to ask, like most of this was previously discussed. By searching into the Discord channel, I was able to get answers. So that was one thing that I found very helpful. But yeah, aside from that, for me, like just looking into the documentations and the examples was enough to start and be able to write the contract.
Okay, cool. And for anybody else here looking, yes, we've got a Discord channel for Stylus. If you go to arbitrum.io, there's a link to the Discord in the top. And I may even be able to pop it in here as we're going along, or in the notes at the bottom. So we've got a Discord channel. There's also a Telegram channel for Stylus developers as well. So you can get on there as well. I think there's a link. I think there's a link to that from the site as well. So cool, yeah. But playing around with examples, that's definitely a good way to learn. That's the way I learn about stuff, is pick up an example and try and deploy it and kind of have a go with it and see. So, okay. Looking forward, firstly, is there anything that how do you anticipate kind of like Stylus helping you kind of scale and expand the protocol? Is there anything kind of new coming up you want to talk about or hint at or not, up to you, as to what's coming up? And where can people kind of try out Fairblock? What can they do with it at the moment?
Yeah, well, maybe you want to take it.
Yeah, I think Stylus is like a very good tool for us to use in terms of deploying more cryptography primitives and making that available to the EVM community, so that these developers can actually build more interesting applications and sort of innovate on top of this by using these primitives. I think there's still a lot of, like, Stylus is relatively early, so there's still a lot of like breaking changes that we need to keep up with, and sometimes like the docs aren't always as up to date, and we need to actually like go digging around in other resources, either like by looking at the code directly or going on Discord or like asking people from the team directly. I expect that like when Stylus becomes a lot more stable, this sort of development workflow will probably standardize and be a lot better. And lastly, I think something that we're still trying to work on is further optimizing our contracts. So right now they're deployed on testnet and pending audit, and then we'll deploy these on mainnet for everyone to use. Yeah, and we have our repos all public. All the contracts are public, and we have some example like starter code on how one might be able to use the contracts and test it. So they're all deployed on testnet right now, and I think we have a GitHub linked. I'm not sure if it'll pop up in the chat or not, but yeah, it'll be there.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get it put up down below. Payments just put it in the private chat. GitHub.com/fairblock/Arbitrum contracts, and that's the contracts for decryption in there that people can have a play with as well. And also Fairblock's site, fairblock.network/applications. They can see some of the applications that are on there, and there's also a Discord link. I'm not going to try and spell out, but we'll put those in the notes as well. So thanks very much for that.
It looks very encrypted, the link.
It does look encrypted, doesn't it? Yeah. Discord links definitely random. I used to work with Protocol Labs and IPFS, so everything looks encrypted coming out of that, right? So everything's a CID. Everything is just a random hash of numbers in that world. So you kind of get used to looking at everything being trying to work out what is that? Okay, right, yeah, that is actually a CID that's just representing something. But anyway,
time in Protocol Labs, maybe you can see the pre-image.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, that'd be cool. So cool. Anything else before we want to wrap up? Anything else from any of you want to add in before we close up the stream?
I think we are pretty excited that like we are always like reiterating, like introducing new technologies on the cryptography side and like confidentiality network side. So there's a lot to build. we have like one of the good things about us, like our team, is that we've actually built all of these applications that are really working, which is I don't know, it's good to have the applications that working in crypto, and you can, instead of learning them from our docs, you can actually go to our GitHub, fork them, and just like change them in a way that it just like transforms to another cool application. So we have like tools in like DeFi, voting, gaming. We can use the same thing for like many AI applications. And if you just like fork them, we have our Discord for developers here as well. There's obviously Stylus, Discord, and really good several people on both sides that can help builders to build like very like unique kind of applications. And we are like both teams. Like I know Arbitrum is pretty good for supporting builders. We are also doing our best to support like any kind of support that we can do on the business side or on the technical side. We are there for them.
Cool. Brilliant. Anybody else? Thank you very much, then. So thank you, Payman, Satara, and Bowen for coming on and talking about Fairblock here. And a reminder to everybody, if you subscribe to this, there's you can see the schedule of new episodes coming up. Like I said, we've got Lit Protocol next week, and then we've got the Pro series coming up in 2 weeks' time, in which we'll be diving deep down. All the previous records are on there, so I urge you to go and check them out as well with all the other. I think we've done 3 of this series so far as well that you can also check out with other projects that have been building on Stylus. And there's the 3 episodes of the Pro series as well that have happened. So you can have a look through there and actually go through code and stuff. Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.